In the darkest corners of crime history, there's a name that sends shivers down the spine. A real-life monster hiding behind an ordinary face, unleashing pure horror. That name is Jeffrey Dahmer. From hunting victims to experiments in cannibalism of Jeffrey Dahmer, the cold-blooded monster of Milwaukee. Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His father, Lionel Dahmer, was a chemist who spent most of his time in the lab, and his mother, Joyce Dahmer, was a housewife who suffered from depression and anxiety. The Dahmer family looked completely normal from the outside, but inside the house was full of tension and conflict. Jeffrey and his younger brother, David, constantly witnessed severe fights between their parents. These fights had a deep effect on Jeffrey and made him feel lonely and isolated from childhood. A specific event that happened in Jeffrey's childhood was that when he was 4 years old, the family moved to the state of Ohio. This move made Jeffrey feel unstable and unable to form a deep relationship with anyone. His parents were mostly busy with their own fights and did not pay attention to Jeffrey's emotional needs. From childhood, Jeffrey showed strange behaviors. One time, his father noticed that Jeffrey was playing with the bones of dead animals. This happened when Jeffrey was about 10 years old. But instead of being scared or worried about Jeffrey's future, his father was happy that his son was interested in science. Later, Jeffrey started collecting the bodies of dead animals and dissecting them. This was a kind of hobby for him, but in reality it showed a dark and sick mentality. His parents, instead of paying attention to Jeffrey's psychological problems, were more focused on their own fights. This inattention caused Jeffrey to withdraw more into himself and his psychological disorders to deepen. Another event in Jeffrey's childhood was that when he was 8 years old, his house moved to a new house. In this house, Jeffrey had an attic room where he was mostly alone. This isolation made Jeffrey sink more into his dark and strange thoughts. Jeffrey Dahmer became more isolated than before during his teenage years. In school, his strange behaviors made children avoid him. Jeffrey was usually alone and had no close friends. He didn't even participate in school group activities, like sports teams or clubs. Most of the time, he sat alone in a corner and seemed to be lost in his own world. A specific event that happened in Jeffrey's high school years was that one time his teacher noticed Jeffrey whispering to himself in class and staring into empty space. When the teacher asked him what was wrong, Jeffrey just said, "Nothing, I'm thinking." These behaviors showed that Jeffrey was sinking more and more into his mental world. Jeffrey even had problems in his studies. His grades were usually low, and the teachers thought that Jeffrey had no interest in studying at all. But in reality, Jeffrey couldn't focus on his studies because of his psychological problems. In his teenage years, Jeffrey began to discover his sexual desires. But this discovery was accompanied by confusion and anxiety for Jeffrey. He felt that he was also sexually attracted to men, but he couldn't share these feelings with anyone. The Dahmer family was very traditional, and Jeffrey was afraid that if anyone found out about his desires, he would be rejected. A specific event that happened during this period was that Jeffrey once saw a young man on the street and liked him. Jeffrey tried to connect with that man, but the man didn't pay attention to him. This incident made Jeffrey feel lonely and rejected. Jeffrey even once tried to be friends with a classmate, but when the classmate noticed Jeffrey's strange behaviors, he avoided him. This incident caused Jeffrey to withdraw more into himself and feel that no one could understand him. In his teenage years, Jeffrey began to consume alcohol. He saw this as a way to escape his problems. Alcohol made Jeffrey feel better temporarily, but in reality, this alcohol consumption only made his psychological problems worse. One time, after consuming alcohol, Jeffrey tried to approach a young man and make a sexual request, but the man didn't pay attention to him and left Jeffrey alone, and this incident caused a feeling of anger and despair to appear within Jeffrey. Jeffrey even once tried to kill himself after consuming alcohol. He took a razor and cut his wrist, but fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, this suicide attempt was unsuccessful. This incident showed that Jeffrey was extremely unhappy with his life and was looking for a way to escape psychological pain. Jeffrey Dahmer committed his first murder on the 18th of June, 1978, when he was only 18 years old. His victim was a young man named Stephen Hicks, whom Jeffrey had met at a party. Jeffrey and Stephen drank alcohol together, and after that, Jeffrey invited Stephen to his parents' house. In the house, Jeffrey tried to have sexual intercourse with Stephen, but Stephen resisted. This resistance made Jeffrey angry, and he hit Stephen's head with a sports dumbbell. After that, Jeffrey strangled Stephen and buried his body in the basement of the house. A few days later, Jeffrey took the body out, dismembered it, and poured acid on it to destroy it. This murder was the beginning of a series of horrible crimes that Jeffrey committed in the following years. After killing Stephen Hicks, Jeffrey did not commit a crime for several years. He joined the army but was discharged from the army due to psychological problems and alcohol consumption. After that, Jeffrey lived in Florida for a while and then returned to Milwaukee. His presence in the army made him learn many things and use that knowledge in his crimes. In the 1982nd, Jeffrey started killing again. This time his methods were more sophisticated. Jeffrey usually invited young men, especially black and Asian men, to his house on the pretext of drinking alcohol or taking pictures. After that, he poisoned them, strangled them, or killed them with a blow to the head. Jeffrey Dahmer had strange and horrible methods for killing victims. He usually dismembered their bodies after killing them and kept some of their body parts as souvenirs. Jeffrey even ate some of the victims' body parts and put some in acid to destroy them. Another method that Jeffrey used was trying to turn the victims into zombies. By drilling holes in the victims' skulls and pouring acid into their brains, he tried to keep them alive. Jeffrey Dahmer had a strange fantasy. He wanted to create a sex slave who would always be available to him. Even in his interviews, he says, "I wanted to be in control." His meaning of control is to be able to put people under his control. To do this, Jeffrey tried to make the victims half alive with chemicals and acid. He had learned all this knowledge from his father, who was a chemist, but the father had no news of these crimes. He drilled holes in the victims' skulls with a drill and poured acid into their brains, but this only caused their painful death. The story of Dahmer's arrest began with a completely random event. One time, Jeffrey invited a young man named Tracy Edwards to his house and tried to turn him into a zombie. Tracy was able to escape and report to the police. Tracy ran in the streets of Milwaukee and went to a few police officers who were there. Dahmer also followed him and tried to tell the police that Tracy was his friend and it was just a family dispute. But the police became suspicious and decided to go and check Dahmer's house. When they entered the house, they were faced with a truly horrifying scene. Photos of the victims, bones, body parts, and a series of strange and bizarre items that Dahmer had kept from his victim. This is how he was arrested, and his crimes were revealed. After the arrest, Dahmer confessed to everything. He said that from 1978 to 1991, he had killed 17 young men and boys and committed horrible crimes. Some of his victims were dismembered after being killed, and he had even eaten some of their body parts. Dahmer claimed that he was insane and could not control his behavior, but the court did not accept these words. The trial was very controversial, and the media greatly publicized it. The people of Milwaukee and even all of America were in shock that a person could do these things so brutally and cold-bloodedly. Finally, Dahmer was sentenced to life in prison. This means that he was supposed to spend the rest of his life in prison and never be free. But the story did not end here. Dahmer was in Columbia Prison in the state of Wisconsin. This prison was considered a safe place for dangerous inmates like Dahmer. But there was no complete security. Dahmer was a hated person because of his horrible crimes. Many people hated him and some wanted revenge. One of the inmates who was in the same cell as Dahmer was a man named Christopher Scarver. Scarver was a violent and dangerous inmate who had been imprisoned for murder. He was jealous of Dahmer and didn't like his bad reputation. On the morning of the 28th of November, 1994, Dahmer and Scarver were busy cleaning the floor in a part of the prison. This was part of their daily routine. The prison guards were watching them but were not careful. Scarver used this opportunity and attacked Dahmer. Scarver had found a metal bar and used it to beat Dahmer. He knocked Dahmer to the ground and hit his head and body severely. Dahmer tried to resist, but Scarver was much stronger and finished his work. The blows were so severe that Dahmer went into a coma and died after a while. When the prison guards became aware of the incident, they quickly arrested Scarver and transferred Dahmer to the prison hospital. But it was too late. Dahmer died due to severe injuries to his head and body. After this incident, Scarver told the police that Dahmer was a demonic person and did not deserve to live. He claimed that he wanted to take revenge on Dahmer's victims and end his crimes. Scarver even said that he did not regret killing Dahmer and considered this act a moral duty. Dahmer's death was a strange and bitter end for a serial killer. He who had caused the death of many people was finally killed by another inmate. This incident showed that even in prison, there is no complete security, and Dahmer's crimes were with him until the last moment of his life.